Hi there, I'm Judy Holland, and welcome to Happy Nest, the podcast where you can hear the latest research and best advice for living well when your kids leave home. Join me as I interview experts and explore how to reinvent yourself during this critical passage. I hope you'll head over to judyhollandauthor.com and check out my new book, Happy Nest, Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home. Welcome to another episode of Happy Nest. I'm here today with Martha Alderson, who helps people move beyond self-criticism, negative emotions, and unhelpful habits that block them from accomplishing creative goals. The author of Boundless Creativity, a spiritual workbook for overcoming self-doubt, emotional traps, and other creative blocks, Martha focuses on unlocking inspiration. In the next few years, after this crisis is over, and if history is any guide, I believe we'll see a boom in innovation and creativity. We're here today on the Happiness Podcast with Martha Alderson, who helps people move beyond self-criticism, negative emotions, and unhelpful habits that block them from accomplishing creative goals. Martha, I'm so glad that we're with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Martha, what are the characteristics of a creative person? Who is, I know you work with creative people. Who is a creative person?
Well, I truly believe that we all are. I think that it's our birthright, that everything we do is in the spirit of creativity. We're constantly creating. We're creating stories. We're creating meals for our families. We're creating positive feelings. We're creating gardens. Whatever it is, we are constantly in the process of creation. And some of us do that with less stress and anxiety than other people. And I have worked with so many people that are in the arts of various degrees. And I just see how much, personally, I've gone through this too, but how much we trip ourselves up by not thinking we're worthy, doubting ourselves, not thinking we're smart enough. We don't deserve this, whatever it happens to be. And then it dulls our light. I just really want to help people to see that creativity can work on two levels. One is, you end up with something wonderful at the end, or not. I mean, maybe it won't work out the way that you thought. But also we learn so much about ourselves, because as soon as we undertake anything creative or anything in life, we meet ourselves and we meet all of our doubts and insecurities, and also our strengths and, our belief systems. So it's just a really interesting journey that we are all on together, as we go through life. And I think creativity really enhances it.
Right. And I think certainly, Martha, going forward, at least in the next couple years, it's going to be really important for people to reinvent and be creative, because we're going to be jump-starting the economy a little bit. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for new ideas and new forms of creativity, which is why your book, Boundless Creativity, appeals to me so much. I think it's going to be very relevant in the time ahead. Talk to me about what causes our creative energy to soar and plummet.
Okay, so I believe that all of us have a spirit, which is, the non-physical deepest part of us. And it's the life force that's created, that's connected to everything. And energy and liveliness, our intuition, inspiration, all of that come from your spirit. And some people are really in tune with their inner selves. Spirit throws you off. It's really your inner self that's not defined by your outer circumstances or, the mundane banality of life, the physical world. And some of us, because of the expectations that we've assumed from other people or ourselves about who we should be, what we should look like, what we should achieve, what our creativity or whatever should look like, or, what is success, what is failure, that our spirit can be buried beneath all these layers. And that dulls our energy and our capacity to really be an open channel for the muse or the spirit or whatever to sort of come through us. There's a lot of people that I work with, and myself included, where when you're writing or you're doing your art, you're so in the moment and so focused and sort of lost that time and space stop. And, the next day I can read something, or, people can look at what they've done and think, oh my gosh, did I really do that? Because our physical reality has sort of moved aside in order for the creative process to really soar.
Mm-hmm. So what about emotions such as fear and sadness that can creep in on us? How do those emotions, how can they sabotage creativity or sabotage us, and how do we banish them?
Well, again, I think fear and sadness are two of the main negative emotions that can dull our creative force. If we're fearful about how we're going to be judged for what we create, or ridiculed for doing, spending our time, oh, you're wasting your time, you're never going to be anything, let go of this. And if we feed into those beliefs and take on those beliefs and really live in fear, we live a much smaller life than what we need to, or what we came here to sort of live. And then sadness really dulls our spirit and our energy as well, because it's a depressed energy. We don't have that vitality and that hope and that excitement and that sense of possibility that is really helpful if you're trying to create something out of nothing but a hit of inspiration. You hear something and think, oh, I want to make a song that sounds like that in nature. Or you hear a line of dialogue and all of a sudden a whole story sort of appears in your mind that you want to write down. If we're sad or we're fearful, we're not as open to those messages and the inspiration as we could be.
Mm-hmm. So how do we eliminate these dark emotions? How do we eliminate the self-doubt that holds us back from pursuing creative goals?
Well, I think we have to become hyper vigilant of our thoughts and emotions, what we're saying to ourselves and how we're feeling, not to run from them and not to judge them, but to sit with them and to allow the sadness or the fear or the self-doubt to be there, bring it out into the light. And, if you can, sort of wonder, where is this coming from? This feels so familiar. Why is this happening? And the answers may not come at first, but I think by embracing all of you, the good, bad, and the ugly, is self-love. It's spirit of believing in yourself and that all parts of us are worthy. And then I really believe in affirmations, that the negative messages that we've given ourselves are stories that we've made up and we believe because we've said them to ourselves over and over again so many times that they're right under the surface of our skin. And if somebody looks at us, with that look, or somebody says something sort of critical, those fears and insecurities and all of that just rush to the surface and deplete whatever possibilities that we were embracing. And so by changing those with affirmations of saying nice things to yourself. I mean, we can rewrite the story of our lives simply by repeating things that are positive over and over and over again to sort of rewire our brain and override those negative messages that have lived in our mind and our belief systems for sometimes far too long.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have certainly done this personally. You write in your book about being molested as a girl. How did you, that must have put fear in you. That must have put some negative stories in your head. How did you get rid of those demons and move forward? Because you've really accomplished all kinds of wonderful things and have worked with all kinds of creative people in different industries. How did you do that?
Well, it was sort of a triple whammy because it was not just the abuse, the sexual molestation, but and that was sort of repeated for a long time, but it was also being dyslexic and nonverbal. I was often ridiculed as a child because once I started learning how to talk, I talked really funny. I wrote backwards, I read backwards. Lots of things I do are backwards, but it's really served me well, actually, once I could stop this incessant need to be like other people, to conform and to try to, I come from a family of really high achieving geniuses, and here I am, just this kind of mess. But once I was able to embrace my own self and not try to be what everybody was expecting me to be. I remember being told as a child, being shy is selfish. If other people reach out to you, you need to reach back, and sort of being pushed into the limelight of being a model and speaking in front of people, and, all these things that were just terrifying to a person that's introverted and very, painfully shy. And once I realized who I was, I thought, it's like I could forget everything else, but I had to suffer a dark night, more than one. And I went into what I call the abyss, which is just, you have a dark night or a crisis and you fall into a really dark place for however long it takes you to get out. Some people actually never do get out, although they can. And once I did, it was like I shed all of that. And I just embraced who I was. And I didn't care anymore what people said to me. I remember when I first put out my first book that was published traditionally, The Plot Whisperer, which was sort of my breakout book. I've got tons of reviews, but the only ones that I really heard, obviously, the way we are with our negativity, were the negative ones. Mm-hmm. And it was all about, oh, California woo woo. Oh, this is just so out there, da da da. And I, because of that, rather than saying, so what, I took it to heart and I hid. It was like the next book I wrote, I tried hard not to bring these ideas that I have that I really believe in forward. I tried to write like a regular person and
not like yourself.
Exactly. So when I learned to say, so what, it was so freeing. It was like, so what if you don't like me? So what if you think my ideas are wacky? Just so what? Just go off and do something else. You don't have to listen to me.
Well, talk to us a lot. Obviously, a lot of people really do appreciate your ideas, and probably some of these difficult periods you went through helped you connect and understand the emotions of others. Talk to me about some of the people, the industries, the people that you work with to get them unstuck when their creativity is lagging.
Well, I just actually received a review for the workbook. Someone very kindly sent it to me before she posted it, just because she wanted to see what my input was, which of course I don't have any. People can write whatever they want. But I found it so fascinating because she said that she often was jealous of sports people because they were in a team and they had a coach. Mm-hmm. And, they were all in it together, and they were, they had cheerleaders, and they were all sort of pumping each other up to keep the belief high and the energy high. And as writers and creatives, that isn't the case. We go into our imaginations and it's a very solitary inward pursuit. And so what I do a lot in the consultations I've done and the creative transformational consultations I do is to be that cheerleader, is to try to help people see where they are on the universal story, which is sort of this energetic pathway that I believe we're all on together, and understand that the things that are happening to them are actually gifts. They're not there to stop them in what they're doing, or turn them away from what they're doing, but it's to show them that they need something more in order to succeed, or that perhaps they've lost their vision and, need to be brought back into the real path, because we sort of get sidetracked a lot on these dead ends, and then we end up being sort of lost in a maze. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people that find me are people that have sort of gone through some of the same things that I have in terms of self-doubt and insecurity and emotional traps, which is why I wrote this workbook, because I think that there's a lot of us out there that put on a happy face. We do the best we can, but we never live our full potential because we're either so afraid that we'll be ridiculed or we'll be judged or we'll fail, that we just play small.
Mm-hmm. And I think actually that's probably true for just about everybody, but in varying degrees.
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks to me too. I think it's, but back to the whole concept of crisis and what role crisis plays in creativity. We're in a crisis now with this pandemic, and this is a global pause where people are forced to step back and think hard about where they want to go because they can't do a lot of the things they normally do. What gifts, you're talking about gifts, Martha, what gifts can we find in this? What role does crisis play in our development, in creativity?
Well, I think you really said it. I think the fact that we are forced to stop, and go inward. Now, I know lots of people are struggling to put food on the table, to comfort the elderly, or their elder relatives, or people that are sick, people who are dying, and people who are having to accept death. But I do see that when our lives are stopped in this way, or we suffer a crisis of any sort, where we get a horrible diagnosis, we go through a divorce, we lose a child, whatever it happens to be, we have to stay with the pain, because of course that is so real, and really feel that. But if we can come to a place of understanding and go inward, I just feel like there's so many people that were going so fast. I was working with one creative, an artist who, she's a single mom. She has a full-time job and she has a huge commute. And by having this time at home, she's able to pursue things that she never could before. And she's had all of these epiphanies of, when we come out of this, I'm going to do this differently and this differently and this differently. I've really understood what's important in life and who I really am and what I want to do, and those moments are gifts. I mean, they are the opportunity to get off of the hamster wheel and go inward. And when you go inward, you are uncovering, what I was talking about, your spirit or your energy, and allowing it to breathe. And in doing that, all of a sudden, inspiration starts to visit you of, oh, maybe I could do this instead. Maybe I could view this in this way, whatever it happens to be. And then we also hear our intuition, because we have so much deep wisdom within us waiting to communicate with us. But unless we slow down and go inward, we'll never really tap into that. And this is just such a prime time to do that, to hear what the truth is of ourselves, but also our outside world, the people that we surround ourselves with in the past, or the beliefs that we've assumed, or whatever, to be able to look at everything differently and realize that we haven't been living our truth.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of us are on this spinning merry-go-round or hamster wheel or whatever cliche we want to come up with, and the busyness can get in the way of innovation and creativity.
Exactly. It's busyness. It's all the people that say, "Oh, I'm so busy," and I think that it fills up our lives and it makes us feel like, "Oh, well, at least I'm accomplishing all these things." But I don't know that that's really what we're here for, is to just be busy. We're also here to enjoy every moment and, breathe in fresh air. And
yeah. Well, so I think that we are going to see, springing out of this pandemic, I think we're going to see bursts of creativity. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation. I think that, necessity is the mother of invention. A lot of jobs will be gone, but I think a lot of people will create new ones. That's been the path over the course of history. We have crises, and then we have awakenings, and then we move forward in new ways. How do you identify an authentic creative goal? How does one go about doing that? Because I think there's going to be a lot of reinvention in the wings.
Well, I think it's whatever you're called to do. It's not going to necessarily come from outside of you, that somebody is going to say, "Oh, why don't you do this?" or "Why don't you try that?" But it's going to come from within. And again, that's why going inward and being quiet and listening to your intuition and your internal wisdom is really helpful, because inspiration comes from this connection to the whole of everything. And whatever goal that won't leave you alone, that keeps whispering to you in your dreams, that pops up when you're doing the dishes or whatever, that keeps nattering of, show up for me, try this. That is an authentic goal. That is a worthy goal, because I don't believe you would be invited to do this, whatever it is, creating something out of nothing but a wisp of inspiration, unless it was your calling. And in order for anything to manifest, it comes through us. It has to come through us as humans to be able to manifest that inspiration that's coming from elsewhere.
What are some examples of creative goals? Like, I know that writing a book is an idea that can turn into a concrete thing if you slog enough over that, and you keep your slog is the wrong word.
No, it's a good word.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's slog plus, but you've got to initially trust. And when you hit the inevitable frustrations and pitfalls and setbacks, you've got to have the energy to keep going. So what are the steps to launching a creative goal like this? It might be a book, might be publishing a song, might be painting. Can you give me some other ideas? A screenplay?
It's all of that. It's, creating a garden, redecorating your house, painting a portrait, coming up with a website, creating a product that, you could actually sell. Anything that hasn't been done before, or if it has, you're re-visioning it into your own vision of, oh, this is the way it was done before, but I see that this could be taken and done this way. And I think that is what's happening now, as you've said so well, is I live in Santa Cruz, which is right over the hill, we call it, over the Santa Cruz Mountains from Silicon Valley. And there are so many tech people now that are working from home. And I think the whole industry is going to shift, because I think everybody is realizing, why do you have to be on the freeway and commute every day when you can do all of this virtually? Right. And so even that is a creative goal of how can I set up my life so that I can work in this way? And people are having to do that every day. How do I create an atmosphere where my children can be homeschooled and I can still do the work that I need to do and put food on the table and all these different things? Those are creative goals. And they don't have to be big external goals of, I'm going to write the next American novel, because lots of times those goals are for external reasons. I want to be rich. I want to be famous. I want to prove to the world how great I am. And almost it's better when it just comes from within and you are doing it because you're driven to do it. Because sometimes we'll get into a lot of trouble if we're doing it for these external reasons, because when it doesn't work out quite the way we thought, it can be quite devastating.
Right. Well, speaking of devastation and setbacks, you've got a section on motivation. How do we bolster motivation on these types of creative projects when we've got setbacks? Because setbacks are inevitable, right?
Yes. And, the thing that really crushes me from when I hear about it from people is if they experience a setback and then they decide from that setback, oh, I'm not meant to do this. Oh, I'm not smart enough. Oh, this is meant for somebody else. That's not the purpose for setbacks. Really, they are just opportunities to look at what you're doing and figure out what's standing in your way. And lots of times it is this internal self-doubt or whatever it is, our false beliefs about ourselves that we have to dredge up, we have to embrace, and we have to rethink in a way that will best serve our needs. But there are also setbacks that can be external, which is what we're experiencing now with the pandemic. But they can also be that your computer breaks down, or you get a horrible review, or you get rejected by 100 agents, or whatever. But that doesn't mean you need to stop or that you need to judge yourself harshly. It's just saying there's something that needs to shift here. Let me help you figure that out. This is what your internal spirit is saying to you if you are in communication with that quiet part of yourself.
Well, which brings me to the whole idea of a tribe. And you mention in your book, Boundless Creativity, the idea of finding the value of finding a tribe of like-minded people. I know that in my journey as a new author, I have found lots of authors around the world who are authors and speakers, and I continue to connect with them. When I published my book, Happy Nest, it opened a door, and I keep finding more and more people through that door. I've just found you through my podcast door. It just keeps on happening. So how do you suggest or finding a tribe of like-minded people who can help inspire you and help renew your energy on your goal?
Well, I think the internet is a great place, especially now with a lot of people who are choosing to, stay indoors until things are sort of figured out that it's safe to go out. And it really depends on your temperament. Some of us are very quiet, inward people, and we don't need a huge tribe. I have a couple very close, valued friends whom I can turn to if I'm struggling or, need to celebrate or whatever. And I have lots of acquaintances, and I know a lot of people who are very supportive of me, but I don't need a huge tribe. I just need a couple really trusted people. But I think that if your temperament is different than that you are more extroverted or outgoing or social or whatever, being a creative can be really daunting because, again, you're going inward, you're all by yourself. So it's good to get feedback, to have a critique group online, or to, in the old days, go to conferences where you can meet up with other writers or artists or people who throw pots and or jewelry makers or whatever it happens to be, because I think then it's hard when you're trying to communicate to people who are not necessarily open to their own creativity to talk about the things that you're doing. Like as a writer, it's really difficult to talk to people who aren't writers about what you're doing. Oh,
Right.
you mean you're not finished yet? I thought you finished that a long time ago. What do you mean you're rewriting it 500 times or whatever?
Right.
Whereas if you talk to other writers or other creatives, they really get it.
Right. So it's really helpful to have these people that you overlap with that know exactly what you're talking about. Psychologists call that cognitive empathy.
Yes.
And
yes.
So you say in your book, I love this idea that your motivation mirrors your passion for what you're doing. And so I imagine, that's why it's so important that we don't listen to what your parents or your Aunt Susie or your friend has suggested you might do, or you don't let ideas in society shape what you should be doing, right? If your motivation mirrors your passion, then you've got to, what you're saying, I think, is that you've really got to find that passion deep inside you and not be swayed by outside forces.
And it can take enormous courage, to go against the tide, so to speak,
Right.
and to stand up for what you intuitively believe is true for you, your true path or your true passion. It takes enormous courage and self-belief, because there are a lot of external antagonists, that are there to challenge you. And it's not always negative. It can be very positive, because it will help to strengthen and solidify your passion. The more often you stand up for yourself, the easier it is the next time someone doubts you or someone tells you you're nuts or whatever. But if you never do that for yourself, you have to flex your muscles in order to get stronger. And the more often you do that and believe in yourself, the easier it becomes, and the easier life starts to flow, because, a lot of the obstacles you're just kicking out of the way as you make your way forward.
Mm-hmm. So wrapping up, this is great, Martha. Wrapping up, what tips do you have for people in these challenging times? We're in a really different time right now. And again, I think that there will be a lot of innovation and creativity coming out of this global pause. Just off the top of your head, just personally, what tips, what suggestions do you have for people right now as we're trying to use this time well, soldier through it, and look forward to a brighter tomorrow?
Well, I think, again, it's just a great opportunity to be quiet, to listen to yourself. And, if you can rediscover that childlike joy that you once had. I just, when I walk on the beach at low tide and you see these little kids running and squealing and, so excited about the water, and even dogs that just have so much exuberance and energy. And it's like, where did that go? How did we let that disappear out of our lives? And if we can find that again and sort of revisit some of those things that we said when we were young, oh, when I grow up, I really want to be a whatever. And maybe let yourself start to imagine what that would be like, start to do maybe some research about it, start to take on some of the steps that might get you closer to those ideas. I blogged about this one person that had read the workbook, and she said, can be a program. And she said, I'm going to write, she's always wanted to be a stand-up comic. And she said, I'm going to write 2 jokes a day, because I've never really let myself do that. And so I said to her, well, why don't you have at the end, of 1 month, that you'll actually get up on social media or a Zoom thing or whatever, and tell the jokes, become a stand-up comic, which is what you've always wanted to do. And I could really feel that trepidation of, there's sort of a gasp, like, oh my God. But then you could also feel that exuberance of, oh man, what if I really did do what I've always wanted to do? I mean, what would that do to her as an individual to actually allow herself to greet that part of herself and live the truth of it? It just gives me goosebumps to think about the possibilities.
Right. No, absolutely. And then just quickly in a nutshell, last question, why did you write this book? What motivated you to do this?
Well, I referred to the Plot Whisperer book earlier that I wrote for writers about plot. And part of that, and where I got a lot of the negative feedback, there was this whole side about the writer's journey that mirrors the protagonist's journey. And there was a lot of, as much as there was pushback, there was also a lot of support for that. And I wanted to pull that out and have it stand alone, because the amount of people that I've worked with over the years, I know how many people stop what they are here to do because of self-doubt. And I wanted to give them an opportunity to see themselves in a new light, embrace the gifts that they came here with, and be able to help change the world with their vision.
Great. Thank you. Martha, thank you so much for sharing your ideas, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. You gave me some great questions, and it was a thrill.
Thanks for tuning into my Happiness podcast, where we explore how to get the best out of the empty nest. I hope you'll subscribe, write a review, and reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Check out my website, judyhollandauthor.com. Have a great day, and remember, make it happen.